Was Jesus actually born on December 25th? We are on our way to an answer by considering why the early church placed the date on December 25th in the first place. In our first video, we talked about how it actually has nothing to do with the Roman pagan festival, and that story is entirely made up. You can find that in my other video. So, if it's not about Rome, why did they do it? Well, the first thing you have to understand is that for the early church, the most primary significant holiday was Easter, not Christmas. So, our understanding of the dating of Christmas actually is in relation to Easter, because Easter is the centerpiece of the Christian faith. His sacrificial death and Jesus' glorious resurrection is what we celebrate predominantly, even today. Like yesterday at our Christmas services, we celebrated his death and resurrection because that's the centerpiece of the Christian faith. Biblically, when we start thinking about his death and resurrection, there's some really, really close ties between particularly his resurrection and his conception. So, as the early church began reflecting on those close Bible ties between womb and tomb, the celebration of his conception started occurring at the same time of Easter. And in fact, it was the assumption that Gabriel came to Mary on the same date of the resurrection, just some 33 years earlier, which means that the date of Easter gives us a mark for our understanding when the date of Christmas is. But dating Easter is pretty difficult in the early church, but that's another reel for another time. There are two dates that kind of come to the forefront. One is March 25th, which is still the Feast of Annunciation, the day that Christians around the world celebrate the conception of Jesus in the womb of Mary. And the other is April 6th. Well, if you do the math, from March 25th, 9 months later is December 25th, which would correlate with his birth if we think of conception as March 25th. So that's one of the primary reasons that the church locates Christmas on December 25th. The other has to do with the assumption that the days of the year are actually theological. So there's a belief in the early church that the day that God created light and dark, for example, is March 25th as well, because that's the equinox where we have day and light in equal numbers. So that there's also significance to him being born on December 25th, which is the ancient winter solstice, because it's the darkest day of the year, which is symbolic of light coming into the world. Now, we may not think that way because we don't really think of the world theologically, but this is the God of the Bible's world. So they're not wrong in actually assuming that perhaps he works in a way that's consistent with the natural processes. In any case, the date of December 25th actually probably has more to do with the why of Christmas, the reasoning of the gospel and the hope that we have in Christ, than the actual historical when of his birth, which is probably more important anyway. So, was he born on December 25th? Like, maybe it's really hard to tell, but theologically, I actually feel pretty confident that it is good and right